Emir Abdelkader. Very little is known in the Western world about one of Algeria's greatest heroes, Emir Abdelkader. Very few Americans also know that Emir Abdelkader was honored by Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s for saving the lives of thousands and thousands of Christians during Muslim-led massacres in Syria. Abraham Lincoln gave Abdelkader several guns, which are now on display in Algiers Museum of the Monument Shahid. Emir Abdelkader El Jazairi, born 6 September 1808, died 26 May 1883, was an Algerian Islamic scholar, a Sufi, a political and military leader who led a struggle against the French invasion in the mid-19th century. He is seen by Algerians as their national hero. There is a town in El Khadr, Iowa, named after him. He's often only known as Abdelkader because Al Jazairi simply means the Algerian. His name can be translated as Abdel Kadir, Abdul Qadir, or Abdul Qadir. He's also given the name of Emir, which is prince. He was born in a place called Muaskar in the area of Oran. His father was a sheikh in the Qadri Sufi order of Islam. In his childhood, he learned to memorize the Quran, and he was well trained in all kinds of theological and linguistic studies, and he was much better educated than his peers. In 1825, he set out for the Muslim pilgrimage Hajj with his dad. While in Mecca, he encountered Imam Shamil. He talked at long lengths about all different kinds of topics. He traveled to Damascus and Baghdad. He visited the graves of famous Muslims such as Sheikh Ibn Arabi. This experience cemented his religious enthusiasm. On his way back to Algeria, he was impressed by the reforms carried out by Muhammad Ali in Egypt. He returned to his homeland a few months before the arrival of the French. In 1830, Algeria was invaded by the French. French colonial domination of Algeria took over, but from what the Ottoman Empire had already done to the people of Algeria. Within 2 years, Abdelkader was made an emir, and with the loyalty of a lot of his tribes, he began a rebellion against the French. He was effective at using guerrilla warfare, and for a decade, he scored many victories. He often signed tactical truces with the French, but this didn't last. His power base was in the western part of Algeria, where he was successful and united the tribes against the French. He was noted for his chivalry. On one occasion, he released French captives simply because he had insufficient food to feed them. However, Abdelkader had to submit to the French. The French armies grew very large and brutally suppressed the native population and practiced a scorched earth policy, which means they burned the earth around it, destroyed everything they could. Abdelkader's failure to get support from the eastern tribes, except for the Berbers of western Kabyle, also contributed to the quelling of the rebellion. On December 21, 1847, after being denied refuge in Morocco, strangely paralleling Jugurtha's career 2,000 years earlier, Abdelkader was forced to surrender because he couldn't get into Morocco. 2 days later, his surrender was made official to the French governor of Algeria, Henri de Orleans, Duc d'Aumale. Abdelkader was exiled to France in violation of the promise that he would be allowed to go to Alexandria Acre on the faith of which he had surrendered. His entire family was detained in France. Abdelkader and his family were detained in France, first at Toulon and then at Pau, beginning in November 1848, and then transferred to the Château d'Amboise. There he remained until October 1852, where he was released by Napoleon III on taking an oath never again to disturb Algeria. The emir then took up his residence in Broussa, moving in 1855 to Damascus. While in Damascus, he defended Lady Jane Digby and Richard and Isabel Burton. In July 1860, conflict between the Druze and the Maronites of Mount Lebanon spread to Damascus, and local Muslims attacked the Christian quarter, killing over 3,000 persons. Abdelkader and his personal guard saved a large number of Christians, bringing them safely into his house and into the citadel. For this action, the French government, which granted the emir a pension of 4,000 louis, bestowed on him the Grand Cross of the Légion d'Honneur. He was also devoting himself to philosophy the rest of his life until Damascus in 1883. There is a mosque in Constantine, Algeria, dedicated to him. He was buried in Damascus in the same mausoleum as Ibn Arabi until his remains were returned in Algeria after the Algerian independence. Abdelkader's struggle can be divided into two stages. The first period was from 1832 to 1839, and it was marked by a series of successful armed struggles, interrupted by tactical treaties with the enemy who violated them one by one. But the Emir used these ceasefires to unify the various tribes and reinforce his military capability. The second period, from 1839 to 1847, was a war of total all-out bashing against a merciless army. Alongside engaging in the war, Abdelkader set up a strong state apparatus. He levied taxes, he minted money with Quranic verses on the coins, and organized a unique centralized mobile administration called the Smala, which was constantly on the move to avoid the French weakening of the resistance. From the defense point of view, the emir set up an army of 8,000 infantry and 2,000 horsemen, composed of volunteers only. By 1837, it acquired 240 artillery guns made in arsenals created by the Mujahid leader, where gunpowder, shells, and rifles were being produced. Despite numerous victories, Abdelkader could not struggle against a 100,000-strong French army, which practiced a scorched earth policy, killed children, old folk, and cattle. The captain of the Smala in 1842 dealt a very deadly blow to the Muslim resistance, and the emir's personal library with priceless documents was destroyed. Deprived of the refuge in Morocco by King Abdurrahman, who first entered the war on Abdelkader's side against the French, but lost and gave in to the French conditions, and to not avoid and have a total massacre of civilians and destruction of their properties, the Mujahid proposed in 1847 to the French his surrender, under the condition that he be allowed to go to one of the Mashrek countries along with his kith and kin, and among those Mujahideen wished to accompany them. The son of the king let him go to France. But the problem was this. When he arrived at Toulon, the King of France sent him a message to renounce his department. If on behalf of the king you were to offer me all the riches of France, and you were able to replace them all on my raw wool garment, I would prefer to be thrown in the sea, the waves which break against the walls of my prison, rather than give up the commitments made to me publicly and officially. I shall take these commitments to my grave. I am here as your guest. Make me your prisoner if you want, but shame and dishonor will reach you, not me. They never let him return to Algeria. He was a simple man. All he wanted to do was be with his people. Abdelkader was a very simple man. He was a thinker and a poet. He forced the admiration of his enemies and the Western elite of his time by his greatness. This greatness was not a result of Orientalist ideas, socialist theories, or state capitalism. It stemmed from a pure Islamic background. It was the consequence of a thorough Islamic upbringing through education in the Sharia, the Tariqat, and its practical implementation in Islamic leadership. It owes itself to Islam and Islamic culture. It is therefore an example for the Muslims throughout the world to ponder and take heart. If you'd like any more information about Emir Abdelkader, you can reach me, Kathleen Woolrich, at KWOOLR@AOL.com. KWOOLR@AOL.com. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Emir Abdelkader.